welcome to week 3. Hope you're doing well. Yes, I am a lot more casual today. Got a Colorado hat on, got my Oklahoma State sweatshirt on, and weather's a little bit more decent this week. I know that a lot of people here in North Texas, especially if you are familiar with cold, you get acclimated and you get a little bit too adjusted to the point where if you're anything like me, you miss the warm seasons. And they do get warm in the summertime, but that really doesn't have anything to do with this class. But anywho, this week we are going to be journeying, looking at chapters 5 and 6. I'm going to be lecturing on chapter 6 as you journey through and record and take your own notes for chapter 5 as we continue to journey through counseling skills. And this is a class that if you've taken my class before, that may be surprising to you that I'm going this much by the book. Usually a lot of times I take concepts and we kind of take the application behind that, and that's what I lecture from. And I'm still doing that a little bit more so than what's traditional, but hopefully you're getting the application and it's assimilating into who you are and the opportunity for you to be able to make your decision, thus you getting to sit in front of those individuals and coming up with concepts, coming up with foundations, coming up with what you feel like is going to be best for that individual that's sitting across from you. We're going to be talking about essential action skills here in chapter 6, but I wanted to take a step back and reflect on the assignment number 1. And you, ladies and gentlemen, have done phenomenal. I know that this exercise can be highly uncomfortable. All the papers that I've read, I have been impressed the way that y'all have pushed through the threshold of discomfort and to be able to see the value of it, to be able to learn more about ourselves, which I always talk in stages of goals. But also I want people to understand what holds people back from goals, which is stress, cortisol, the chemical associated with stress and pressure and tension, as well as the subconscious beliefs, just as we understand them within Scripture. It says, as a man believes in his heart, so is he. And of course, that's talking about the dynamics of those subconscious beliefs and understanding how important they are versus the conscious beliefs and how those two work together. But these are the dynamics. So as we're looking at goals, it's the idea of helping them assess where they want to go and what are the appropriate steps to get there, those objectives, right? Because a lot of times people miss celebrating and receiving the encouragement that they need. One, to be able to talk internally to themselves, but even externally by acknowledging, hey, you know what? I'm moving forward to that goal. A lot of times people see in the 17 years, they always see the times, whatever goal that it is, hey, I want to swim in the Olympics. If they hit that, then as a result of that, they see that as a win. But if they don't, then they see that as a tremendous loss. Well, we understand through Dr. Brene Brown's research that learning happens significantly through failing as long as I don't adopt it. And that was her part. And then here's the part we understand through theology. As long as we don't take those things and allow them to attempt to tell us who we are, thus our identity. That's really where failure actually can jump on us and actually impact us more significantly than just learning by us adopting through agreement into who we are. So helping them see, okay, maybe we didn't get to swim in the Olympics, but where did we start out? Well, I hadn't even ever gotten in the swimming pool. Oh, okay. Well, have you gotten in a swimming pool before? This year? Yeah, actually I have. Okay. Well, is it a win? Well, is it something that you were doing you weren't doing beforehand, but that you were moving closer to that direction? Yeah. Okay. Again, I assess these as wins. Why? But the concern is beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So the idea of getting them to own these wins helps encourage them, helps them shape their thoughts, thus their beliefs attached to those thoughts so that they can continue to move forward to what it is that they want. Well, what else have you done? I've actually swim every day. Really, every day. Well, Brady, there's a couple days that I wasn't able to. Okay, but you swam more days than you didn't. Yes. Well, is that moving closer to what it is that you want overall? Yes. Well, is that a win? Yes. And what I'm doing is I'm helping them see, guess what? Even though we may or may not have gotten to that overall goal, have they taken some appropriate steps to get there? Yes. And as a result of that, that's called progress. Those are the wins that I want individuals to be able to see. Why? Because if they're only assessing the goals of these things that they're experiencing, that they're doing, that they're deciding, that whatever that may be, and they want that to stop and or start, and that is the outlook that they're seeing whether or not success takes place, then as a result of that, man, that is a lot of pressure that they're placing upon themselves. What do we know about stress? According to research, cortisol, stress, thus cortisol, the chemical, does a couple of things. One, we understand that the immunity is in the gut, according to medical research, and as a result of that, there's more neurons from the gut to the brain than the brain to the gut. So we see the importance of the gut. Well, Brady, what does this have to do with anything? Well, it has everything to do with everything when we understand things in context. Okay, because a lot of times we understand, okay, if you're not just doing that goal, then why aren't you doing that? Are you lazy? Are you just do that or stop doing that? And as a result of that, we understand not to communicate that very verbiage anymore, but the contextual nature of what we communicate, we're basically saying the same thing, even though we're not really saying that thing, right? And as a result of that, the client, the person sitting across from you, is aware of that, and it causes them tremendous confusion. Oh, there must be something horribly wrong about from me because the person that is helping me is basically telling me that to stop it. Well, boy, that is earth shattering. Why haven't I thought of that before? And they have. They have. They're sitting across from you because they don't understand the dynamics that's holding them back from what it is that they want in life. And as a result of that, they're needing some foundation, they're needing some context, they're needing some opportunities to process what this looks like. And I always like the opportunity, and we're going to talk a little bit about this, the opportunity for them to buy in, because sometimes you're going to have parents that push, not physically, but or the external dynamics of enforcing their children to counseling. There's going to be times where you may get somebody that's court mandated to be in counseling. There's not that internal desire for them to be there, but as a result of that, there's something externally outside of them that is forcing them to be there. So how do we build buy-in in this system, in the process? Because if they don't, they can physically be there, but is that a benefit to them? So that they can check a box, get what it is they need, and as a result of that, not be anywhere closer to evolving into who God died and redeemed them to be, to enriching their lives and the people's lives around them, as well as our country and all that God wants to do, not only in them, but through them. So again, what we understand is the gut. This is the reason why you hear the idioms of, hey, what's your gut saying? Trust your gut. These type of things like that is because there is significant messaging going on between the gut and the brain. The gut and the brain. And so if the immunity lies in the gut, and stress, what it does is when we are stressed, it all the energy in the gut eradicates and forces it to the limbs, to the extremities, to the arms and legs. Why? Because cortisol and stress is intended to make us run, to motivate us to run. Can be helpful and productive depending on where we're running and who we're running to. If we're running to a comforter, thus God, then perfect, right? Because again, in those early ages when mankind was running from saber-tooth tigers, they needed the cortisol to actually get them out from that stressful situation. A car pulls out in front of you on Highway 114 now here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We don't have the conscious orientation from a conscious dynamic to say, a car pulled out in front of me, I need to stop. By that time, bam, we've already rear-ended that individual, right? So the idea of fight, flight, or freeze and cortisol plays an important role, but sometimes in those dynamics is great, but in a lot of other dynamics, man, it impacts us significantly for what it is that we want in life. So helping them understand these dynamics so that we can actually walk through a process helps them understand, oh, wow, there's a lot of complexities to this. Yes, and this is why I'm here to walk alongside you to help. Oh, so is there, so that hopefully they can rest that, man, that I am too far gone from the opportunity of receiving help. No. And we see that within Scripture. Jesus was impacted everybody they came across from. What about us? So again, what are the complexities about this that impact people? So we want to assess and address these dynamics. And so one of the things that would be helpful for you students as you continue to move closer to the field, for those of y'all that are already in there, fantastic. But those of y'all that are continue, is the idea of what does that first session look like? Of course, we want buy-in from the individual, whether that's adult, whether that's a marital couple, whether that's a teenager, whatever that may be. We want to be able to create some type of framework of context. Why? Because I always believe that context drives grace, grace thus forgiveness. The opportunity of forgiving internally as well as forgiving externally. The opportunity of receiving God's forgiveness, the opportunity of us forgiving ourselves for whatever decisions and or choices we may have done, or holding on to something that was done to us, as well as the opportunity of eventually getting to the place of forgiving something external, for someone externally. So, what does that look like for you? What does it look like for you as somebody comes in to be able to build a rapport? For us to stay focused on the goal, which is really what? Connection. The idea of this kind of tension between task and relationships, right? And again, if I remember hearing one of the pastors who once said, it's almost like being on a log in a river. At the opportunity of, on one side you have task, on one side you have relationships. If you're on top of that log and you fell off, what side would you fall off on? And it's good to be aware of the side that you fall off on, just so that you are aware of that. So the opportunity is that you can work on that and become more enriched and more, not more stronger, but stronger in the process, right? So in that, there's times where somebody may come in and you're building a rapport with them, and they're talking about something that you absolutely love. I remember hearing one of the professors talk about the idea of him. He called himself a gearhead. Again, I love cars. I don't really know a lot about cars. I don't, I pop the hood. Wow, look, that's really, really cool. Couldn't tell you anything about that. This professor knew everything about that. And one of his clients was talking to him about like a 1970 Chevy Sevelle, super sport, just amazing. Even to the point where he even got to get a ride in the car when the client actually brought it to his office. And so in that, the first minutes of his time is like, great, this is what the way that the rapport is going to be built. But as he continued on, he was sitting there having this internal clock of, okay, hey, guess what? We kind of need to shift and get to the place of why we're here, not to talk about cars, but the dynamic of talking about him, what it is that he is impacting his life, the decisions, the emotions, choices, what have you, and as a result of that, continue to move forward. So in that, it's great to have something in common with our clients, but the dynamic of making sure that we're not making the 50-minute session, 45 to 50, and even to the extent of some of the crisis orientation where we may take 60 minutes plus, that we actually create the foundation in a very smooth transitional way. But the idea of, guess what, we need to get to work. And so a lot of times what I'll do is every session, even for the ones that I've worked with for a while, I want to connect personally with them. Hey, so hey, last week you said something that you're going to go to the movies. Hey, how was the movie? Was it pretty cool? Something that I should talk about? And of course they're going on in details because they're in love with it or whatever it may be. And as a result of that, I'm like, oh man, I may even cut them off after if they're going too long, right? And again, be careful how you utilize that because that can seem rude and it can seem offensive as well. But you will experience times where you'll have some people that talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And again, it's good for them to verbally process, but at some point, what does it look like when you understand the difference between them verbally processing and or deflecting, and they're doing it through verbal interactions? I have an individual that I've interacted with, highly intelligent, and as a result of that, this individual would utilize talk as a way of deflecting from us. And so in that, being aware of this, you may have to cut individuals off ever so often. Okay, wow, that sounds like an amazing movie. Man, I'm going to have to add that to my repertoire of things that I'm going to have to watch. Man, that sounds awesome. So as we transition from the movie, let's talk about you. Hey, how have things been since the last time we met? Something of that nature. We want to make sure that we are maintaining the balance between relationship and task, and as a result of that, making sure that we're minimizing distractions, even if the dynamic of we thinking, well, guess what? Is it really a distraction? This is actually a benefit because we're building rapport. Okay, great. And you can justify that within yourself, but as a result of that, if we're taking 30 of our 50 minutes still building that rapport, and it's the third session, and again, some of these you're like, well, Brady, is that kind of a concrete? No, because each individual is going to be different. There may be times where it may take a time or two to really build and establish a rapport so that you can move forward, depending on what kind of level of trust, what kind of level of doubt and skepticism they may have. One of the things that we need to be aware of is the agency or insurance company that's paying for the counseling, they do not care, or I don't want to say do not care. That sounds a little harsh, but they are, the caring apparatus about the relationship, but what they really want is results. Understanding that it shouldn't take 20 years, but it should, but it's probably not going to take 2 sessions either. As a result of that, they're going to want to know, hey, why is this individual in here for 20 years? What's going on? And so in that, I know that there is a dynamic within the counseling realm of a lot of counselors they don't take insurance. And, they give super bill, which basically the individual comes in, sees you don't take insurance, you're considered an out-of-network provider. And as a result of that, they pay you your $175, whatever it may be, $150, $200. And as a result of that, you write up a document and you send that to them. They send it on to their insurance companies, and whatever amount of money that they can get reimbursed back, that's called a super bill. Insurance is a great way for counselors to be able to meet the public. Why? Because that's one of the very first questions you're going to get when people call in is, hey, this is Brady Daniels counseling service. Yeah, that's great. Well, do you take insurance? No, I don't. But you want to hear about the philosophy? No, not really. I want to know about your insurance. Okay. Do you take my insurance? No. Are you going to? Does anybody in your facility take my insurance? And so in that, the dynamic of will you take insurance? As for those individuals of you that are going to go into the clinical field, and as a result of that, why and or why not? I was against insurance. Again, my dad sold insurance. My father-in-law sold insurance. I was around insurance even in graduate school. It's what helped put me through graduate school. That and my grandmother, which I'm very grateful for. But in that, the dynamic of I was always scared of insurance companies because of the horror stories you'd hear. Investigate those things for yourself. Have a good understanding of, do I? And if so, then why do I? And if I don't, great, then why do I not? So continue on chapter 6. They talk about the developmental levels. The difference between crisis and more stable. There's 3 areas the book talks about. Familiarize yourself with those 3 levels. But the dynamics of when someone comes in and they're 30 years old, chronologically we assess those individuals being at a mental and emotional level of a 30-year-old. But there is this inner child phenomena, and as a result of that, study this. Why? Because the dynamics of what we understand through Freud's theory of, oh goodness, it was on my, the terminology, oh goodness, forgive me. I apologize. Hopefully they'll come to me. But the idea of, well, that's really bothering me that I can't remember that terminology. But fixation. There we go. Fixation wasn't a really difficult word, but just couldn't think of it. But the dynamic is, the idea of, anywhere from 5 to 7 years old, this age of this whole pleasure, pain sensation, gravitating towards pleasure, dissipating towards pain. And that age to 5, 7, from a developmental standpoint, they're supposed to kind of evolve, if you will, enrich to a more integrous way of living. But the dynamics of what takes place in those early formations, that trauma takes place, whether that's absolute and or perceived, then as a result of that, they can continue to grow chronologically. But the dynamic of emotionally, the individual can actually sit down on the inside. And as a result of that, just as a child, you'll see in Walmart or wherever it may be, well, I can't get what I want, or I'm mad, or whatever it is. They cross their arms and basically sit down. And that's what happens within this inner child phenomenon, is that the child actually, because of whatever it is that they're experiencing, whatever it is that they're perceiving, they actually sit down on the inside. The individual continues to grow chronologically because of time and space, and as a result of that, each and every year they get older chronologically, physically. But emotionally, are they continuing to grow? Even though we can assess that they are, really this inner child phenomena, they really aren't. And so you can have a 30-year-old that's sitting in front of you, but as a result of that, they may have an emotional level of a 4-year-old. And we can actually see this in society when you see people that will respond in times of crisis, in times of being told no, in times of stress-oriented dynamics. All of a sudden, something will rise out of them, and you're like, boy, they are acting like a little child. Well, there's a reasoning for that. And so one of the great things that you can do in this is making sure you have the context of why that may be the case, so that we don't invalidate what it is that they're experiencing, but yet we can actually give context from that. And the beauty of Jesus is he is not determined by time and space, that he can actually go back there and actually allow wherever it is that they're sitting to be healed. And this is one of the things that I love getting to do in counseling, is the opportunities of when people when this happens, and I would go out as far as saying this happens more times than not within a lot of people. One of the counselors I love following is a guy by the name of Dr. Alexander Lloyd. Has a tremendous counseling practice here in the United States. He actually, in one of his books, probably one of my favorite books that I do get a lot of research out of, called Beyond Willpower, he actually goes as far as saying that the vast majority of people over here in the West are probably at a emotional level of a 5-year-old. And again, when I heard that, I was irritated, and part of that was bubbling out of me, and I was like, why am I getting so upset? And part of this is the idea of not being aware of the dynamics of what happened in my early childhood, and how those things impacted me to the point where I was tied to those moments in time. So in this, take that for what it is. Disagree with me if you will, that's perfectly fine. But in this, be aware of the inner child phenomena, and be aware of the individual sitting across from you developmentally. We talked about clients forced or coerced into counseling, the dynamic of are they buying in to the plan and purpose and the process of what it is that you are cultivating in your practice. Because if not, then as a result of that, why are they there? We want to make sure that because if they're not, then they're not going to take personal responsibility for what the goal is. They're not going to have buy-in to the goals. They're not going to take personal responsibility or anything like that. And so a lot of times, usually working with minors, this can be the case. Now, again, I don't want to subjugate them into a category that it's only them. No, because I experience a lot of adults that as a result, well, my husband made me come, or my wife made me come, or whatever it may be, or I got caught doing this at work and my boss is pushing me here, and so can you just kind of write me a note, and well, I can. But we're gonna have to talk about some things, and then of course I'm gonna have to, we're gonna have to talk about what that note means, and why it is we're writing that, and what it is that note, communicates not only to you but whoever it is that you hand that to. So as a result of that, we want buy-in. But the reason why we want buy-in is not the idea that they'll continue to come back, but as a result of that they see a benefit of why they're paying you, or whoever it is that they're paying you. We want to move from engagement, that rapport building, into action. A lot of times either the dynamic is like, oh my goodness, Brady, how do you know what's waiting for you when they come in? And a lot of times what I do, and a lot of times I learned this early on as God showed me, Brady, whoever, and this may sound very insensitive, and again, my hope and heart in communicating this is not to communicate insensitivity, but to communicate how I view this, that's helped me out. And again, if it's helpful to me, hopefully it's helpful to you, and if not, then go ahead and say, well, that wasn't, but whatever. But the individuals, regardless of what they're coming in with, the resolve is still one and the same. The opportunity of them to connect deeper, and regardless of where their interaction is with Jesus, Jesus is the answer. Well, Brady, that sounds very cliche. I understand that, but really, in all actuality, it is the truth. And so the idea of taking that approach is not me coming from a place of insensitivity. It's coming from a place of not getting so overwhelmed by what it is that I'm reading in their intake, or what it is that I'm hearing, but the idea of like, okay, time to get to work. Time to get to work. And so a lot of times what I'll do is, because I'll say, hey, in this process, one the things that I can do is I can help you challenge your thoughts. I can help you process your emotions. But one of the things I cannot do is I can't decide that I want this. Only you can. So as a result of that, hopefully by the end of today, you'll be able to determine whether or not you do or you don't want this. And as a result of that, regardless of how that works, if you do, great, we'll figure out a time to meet again. And if you don't, then guess what? We can figure out a way. What is your next best step? Is because you didn't connect well with me, which is fine, because this isn't about me. This is about how we help you. And again, all these different dynamics is how do we help engage them to the place where they are ready for action. We want to utilize what they do in session. We want to use their stories and help them modify and shift and from the standpoint of metanoia, change the way that they think about something. It just was in session on Saturday. And as a result of that, one of the big things I like to assess and address is people's belief systems. Why? Because I believe that this is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, orientation that holds people back. Again, at a Stanford Medical, one of the guys I follow, one of the researchers, says that 95% of what we do happens from a subconscious belief. And so this individual was having issues with parents, and as a result of that, mom was talking about schooling. And so we started having some dynamics, kind of that eye exercise and helping them turn and having a conversation, and me allowing myself to mediate and facilitate that conversation. Finally, what came from this young lady was the idea, I'm not smart enough. I don't understand the content. I don't understand the material, and I'm not smart enough. This young lady said this probably 4 or 5 times. Boom, boom, boom. Right there told me everything that was holding this individual back. It wasn't about not understanding the content. It was, but it wasn't. It wasn't about not understanding how to do something. It was about that she truly believed at the very core of who she was that she wasn't smart enough. The invisible gives shape to the physical. We understand this through quantum physics. We understand this through theology. And as a result of that, hopefully you will take this premise of the idea that our thoughts, our emotions, our imaginations, our desires, our expectations, our will, our what we communicate, these type of things and so on, impact us significantly. They take shape in the physical formation of what we do. So as a result of that, that's why so many people love the idea of CBT and or REBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, and or rational emotive behavioral therapy, is a dynamic of how do we help them be aware of those dynamics, be aware of what their body is being fashioned to based upon how they think and what it is that they're communicating. Let's see. I was listening to the skills of action. A lot of times we are being asked, what theory, right? Singular. What theory do you operate from? And what when I teach theories at the Kings, so much of the time is the idea of us journeying through all the different theories from Freud to Adler to Hume to all the different individuals, existential to CBT to all those differing. And for those of y'all that have already taken the class, y'all understand this. And those of y'all that don't have to and or haven't yet, then you will, unless you don't have to. But again, it's the idea of, okay, well, I like this, but I don't like all of this based upon Rogerian. But I like this, but I like all the. And so what happens a lot of times is we assimilate and or integrate kind of a working philosophy and or theory that works for us based upon the skills and the techniques and the thoughts and the theoretical framework of different people, when we assimilate them into one. This one individual, I was talking with a professor who was working on his PhD and kind of in a residency. He was talking to another counselor, and he asked her this skill, and her response was, it depends on who's sitting in front of me. Excuse me. It depends on who's sitting in front of me, because again, we want this process to fit them like the glove to their hand, right? And so as a result of that, well, Brady, do I have to learn every theory there is out there? Because how do I do that to the point of making sure that this process is seamless for the individual in front of them? No, of course not. But know enough about the differences in theories and what you like and why you like them. And part of this is the idea of you, ladies and gentlemen, are being asked to go through a very intense process, which is undergraduate. And for those of y'all that will continue on to graduate and even PhD or medical school or whatever that looks like, the idea of assimilating with all this research, with all this knowledge and the application behind that, the dynamic is learn how your brain works. Learn how your brain works. Some people love taking notes. Great. If notes are impactful to you and you learn that way, great. My wife, when we go to church, she's over there just jotting down notes left and right. If I take notes, I'm not paying attention to what's really taking place. I'm aware enough to what is being said to the point of writing it down, but it's not going in me. So as a result of that, I can't take notes. I will sit there and listen to the lecture or the teaching or preaching, and then as a result of that, I'm asking God, put that in my own verbiage. I'm trying to process through the filter of how my brain works. I have an 11-year-old little girl, and she thinks very geometrically. And so, in that, we are helping her learn based upon the dynamics of seeing things, whether, of course, science and math is a little bit easier, but history, English, geometrically. And again, that makes it difficult. But in the way that we understand how our brain works, the dynamics of how we are able to absorb information at a tremendous degree. Remember, computers are based upon the model of how the brain works and operates. But as a result of that, instead of utilizing it as a tool, we become very dependent upon it. And again, I get that. I've got my computer, and a lot of times I do research and things of that nature. But when you're in front of somebody, constantly always going back to research, oh, what was that skill or whatever it is, figure out how your brain works. It's amazing how God created the body. It's amazing how God created your brain. And when you learn and understand how your brain works, guess what? These classes, these 7-week classes, these 16-week classes, taking them at your freshman year all the way to your senior year, all the way to graduate school, it seems like it's so overwhelming, and it can be that is the case. But once you understand this to a greater degree, then as a result of that, it's amazing the amount of data that you can actually absorb and hang on to. Sorry, that was kind of like a soapbox I jumped onto. So I apologize, but hopefully that's beneficial to you. Okay, that the action of consequences and sequences, your self-esteem. When someone comes in, as a result of that, being aware of this whole relationship task dynamic, the dynamic of, okay, am I aware of how this individual impacts me? Because there may be somebody that comes in, and as a result of that, I feel very comfortable, confident, competent, with some people, but then all of a sudden people that maybe are a little bit more dogmatic, typical A type personality, if I can say that, versus whatever it may be. But as a result of that, where's my self-esteem in the picture? And as a result of that, if I'm not aware of individuals, you got somebody that's very dogmatic, and as a result of that, in marriage counseling, let's say one of the husband and or wife, one of them is dogmatic, and as a result of that, I kind of shy away from interjecting and creating the opportunity where both of them get to speak because of this type of personality. Well, what level is my self-esteem at to be able to interject to make sure that, guess what, both are able to speak, both of them are be able to be have a voice, both of them are being able to speak and be heard, right? Our behaviors influences other people's reactions. So the dynamic of, a lot of times I will have a pen in my hand. I talked about kind of those micro skills. And in that, depending upon my assessment on if it's going to bother them, and basically I'm just holding on to it. But sometimes, even like on Saturday, this past week, I noticed that holding my pen really bothered an individual that I was meeting with. So what did I do? I held on to it. No, I'm just kidding. I actually put it down and put my hands on my chair, and we continued on. And as a result of that, I could tell the dynamics of where he was, and the distractions of me holding that pen went away as a result of that. Well, Brady, is that extreme? Not extreme, but as a result of that, again, we want to be aware of minimizing the distractions that we are doing. Why? Again, because our behavior can influence the individual. Right? Last time we talked about the idea of active listening, and I could be listening to the individual and being like, especially like if you have a window in your office like I do, and of course the blinds are drawn so people can't look in, but I can, they're cracked enough to where I can see out, and yeah, 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 yep. Everything that we do communicates something. Everything that we say communicates something. And so as a result of that, we want to be aware of these very idiosyncrasies so the dynamics of what we want to communicate is able to be communicated. Clients often do not understand how their behavior affects others. We're wanting to help them assess ownership. We see this within the story of Cain, right? The dynamic of what took place between absolute reality and perceived reality. Absolute reality was God and what it is that was taking place, but Cain's perceived reality was the idea of, because God not accepting what it was that he brought, and of course we understand why, then as a result of that, God did not accept his offering, thus him. Perception. So as a result of that, what did God do when he came to Cain to ask him the very question? Why are you so angry? Didn't say you couldn't be or shouldn't be, but asked a question, and as a result of that, wanted to empower Cain to own where he was, because as a result of that, we can't own what we're not aware of. And ownership is significant in this process of counseling. Why? Because the dynamics of, well, Brady, what about people that are coming in that have been impacted? Yes. Again, the dynamic of like even Adam and Eve. What do we see? Adam's first response back to God. God, the woman whom you gave me, right? Not one of mankind's finer moments. Finer moments. The idea of deflecting back on God. Not only that, but blaming the woman. Not one of our finest moments. But as a result of that, what we look at is the idea of how God is a God of awareness. He wants to bring us into awareness. Why? So that we can own our part. And so if it's something that we've done and choices we made, then helping them understand this and with sensitivity and compassion, but also in the dynamics of how we're articulating. Well, what about the individuals that somebody perpetrated something upon them? Absolutely, but the dynamic of what it is that they can own, which is what? Their response. And again, can be extremely difficult because of the dynamic of trauma, because of the dynamic of that idea of fixation, like we talked about, and the idea of them looking for blame, because the dynamics of early formation within mankind, the dynamic was to blame, and we see that within today, marriage counseling. You see that within family dynamical counseling is the idea of, hey, this happened. Okay, so what happened next? Well, I don't know. That's my mom's fault. Oh, okay. So what's our part? Oh, I don't know. Mom. If mom wouldn't have done that, then I wouldn't be here. Okay. So again, okay, mom did this, and then what happened? I took a chair and threw it through my window. Okay. Okay. So mom did this, and then you took the chair and threw it through the window. Yep. Okay. So mom did that. Okay. Okay. Just processing out loud. And what we see is the dynamics of communicating it multiple times. And I use this technique just as Jesus did with Peter, to the point of getting them to connect. And I'll do this 3 or 4 times. And as a result of that, if they don't, then I'll be like, I'm missing something. Okay, so did mom make you I understand mom's part and why we see mom through that lens, but the dynamic of how did the chair get through the window? Or another dynamic, well, this is what happened, okay, and so the police were called, and because of that, they cited him. Oh, they did, okay, so the police officers saw him as being the aggressor. Yes, okay, okay, and so during that, they didn't say anything about your part. And again, I'm saying that because I'm trying to get a all inclusivity or more inclusivity picture about what took place, so I can help you. Well, actually, I got cited too. Oh, okay. And so if they cited him because they thought that he had some ownership of that. Well, can you help me understand why they would cite you? Well, it's because of oh, okay, okay. Why? Because again, if we can help them own and confess, we understand the spiritual component of ownership through awareness and confession. Wow. And as a result of that, things can move forward as a result. Again, we're wanting to assess the dynamic of ownership. We're wanting to assess the dynamics of blame. We're wanting to assess the dynamics of understanding consequences. So that you threw the chair through the window, then what happened? I got my car taken away. Oh, wow. That stings a little bit, right? Well, I guess right would be a kind of lead. That can stink. Yeah. Oh, and the officer cited you. Oh, wow. 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 Okay. Okay. We always want to uncover desires behind the behavior. What is motivating their very behavior? Right? And as a result of that, we don't want to, again, depending upon your theoretical framework. Now, you may be a behavioral modifiist. You want to modify their behavior. Again, the dynamic of the traditionalism, again, if for those of y'all that take an intro to psychology, really, philosophy is really where we get in motivated psychology. The philosophers would look at all the people and they would see this one individual out there and saying, wow, this one individual does this thing. So as a result of that, if this is what the rest of them are doing, this is what must be normal. This must be abnormal. So it was just a behavioral orientation. They wouldn't look at anything internally until the field continued to evolve into looking at the internal complexities of the mind, of emotions, of thoughts, all these different things. And this is the reason why you get behavioral modifications of people putting rubber bands around the wrist and popping themselves every time the behavior or the thought of behavior would take place. And the idea of associating pain with that in hopes that, guess what, the pain would get them to a place that they wouldn't want to do it anymore. Well, again, depending upon what your perspective, my perspective is, okay, now what you do is you have an individual that is in pain, but the idea of processing and getting closer to the idea of not doing that any longer is not there. Why? Because, again, the idea, and again, behavioral modification based upon traditional behavioral therapy is the idea that we dissipate towards pain. So if I'm doing something that's painful, therefore, I'm going to associate that based upon what I want. So if I want is causing me pain, then as a result of that, that will dissipate. You get to determine that, okay? We want to explore, so motivation is important. The dynamic of, I get this so many times, Brady, I did this and I'm so frustrated with myself. Okay, so you communicating this, guess what? There's a win in there because you're aware of this. So when that happened, what happened next? Well, later on that night, my wife, or later on that night, God convicted me in kindness. Later on that night, I came to, okay, so that's awareness. Okay, great. Internally, externally, okay, you were able to receive that. Okay, then what happened? Well, then I went back to try to make amends. Oh, wow. Because again, so much about who we are is what we choose to do after we're made aware. Does it negate the fact that we weren't aware in the behaviors that we did? No. And that's part of the dynamic of the psychoeducational part of what it is that we do is help lay a foundation so that they are aware through context. Oh, that's why I do these things. Okay? Yeah. And as a result of that, now that we understand that, we're going to continue taking these steps. It may take us a little while, but guess what? Through your will and your desire and God's empowerment of the cross, guess what? Good chance we get there. We want to explore outcomes of current behavior, okay? The desires, the outcomes, we want to affect the current behavior achieving what is wanted. So what do you want? What do you want? And then a plan for action. Again, I talked about the dynamics of the complexities that hold us back. Because one of the thoughts that we have is think about a plan, make a plan, and achieve what you want. Well, the dynamics of research really shows that about 97% of people actually never achieve that because of the dynamics of all these complexities, the subconscious beliefs, cortisol, pressure, stress, all these different dynamics. And so as a result of that, 3% of the population actually have a willpower that can overcompensate for the very things that they want in life. Think about that. So the 97% of people, based upon that research, are going to be sitting across from you crushed of the idea of, man, something's desperately wrong with me. No, it's that we haven't really addressed these complexities. And as a result of that, when we do, then what does it look like in the benefits of moving forward? We want to help reorganize unhelpful thought patterns. This dynamic of what empowers that is subconscious beliefs. The last 7 weeks in utero and the first 7 years of life are vital. Why? Because the brain is in a theta orientation. Beta, alpha, theta, delta. Okay, and as a result of that, they're in a theta orientation. So they are just absorbing. And as a result of that, there's beliefs being adopted. And again, all those different things thereafter, validate those. The hurt, the good, the bad, and ugly, and or create further imprinting upon the subconscious, the back of the back, right? So in that, what we want to do, just as the notes talk about, recognize, acknowledge, identify, and replace. But if we're not careful, what we could do through the process of replacing is deal with substitutionism. Don't think about this bad thought, think about this good thought. And as a result of that, what's wrong with that? And that's why a lot of us actually teach metanoia. Don't think about this bad thought, think about this one thought. But again, what is source? If we go back and look at Genesis 3, where the two trees were in the middle, as Scripture talks about. Pretty fascinating, right? So is that one tree with two different trunks? I don't know. But again, going back to this very complexity, what we see is the idea of source. Source. So who is our source as we look to replace these unhelpful thought patterns? The dynamic of recognizing, just as we see Jesus in the garden, right? Aware, declare, aware of where he was, what he was thinking, what he was feeling, those type of things. Declare. Why? Because our mind will actually project us into the future and or fixate us in the past, trying to create a defense mechanism. Why? Because of the whole pain pleasure sensation. Gravitate towards pleasure, dissipate towards pain. But again, in that moment, we can see the benefit of change actually is leaning into the pain so that the threshold can actually be torn through. And I'll talk a little bit more about that through this process. So aware, declare in that moment, that so that our bodies are actually grounded in that moment. A lot of people don't like to do that. Why? Because it's staying in that moment of pain. Well, Brady, that's not fun. I know. And to actually communicate that that's what we have to do in order to move forward isn't always the most fun, but also the most beneficial if they're open to really experiencing change. Aware, declare, inviting God as source into that very moment. Because again, ladies and gentlemen, we can't do it upon our own. That very threshold that stands in front of us, that when we feel it and we hit it and it causes pain, guess what? A lot of people dissipate, go back to the old ways. Why? Because they tried that. They attempted that. And as a result of that, nothing ever happened other than validating the very pain that they felt. Exactly. Jesus and his ability to break through the thresholds through the opportunity of invitation. We see that within Cain. The idea of what God was wanting was Cain to be aware of what he was, where he was, declare and invite God into that, so that guess what? The dynamic could have been torn through. We see this through constantly, through the parting of the Red Sea and the children walking through. As Psalm 23 talks about, I'll walk through. The two options are either to revert back to old ways or to move through, to pass through. But we can't do it on our own. God must be invited in. God must be invited in. And as a result of that, getting up, just as Jesus did in that moment, as he invited the Father into that very moment when he was aware of blood trickling down his face, and as a result of that, he declared based upon the dynamics of where he was truthful, which he was always, but in that very moment, and equated the Father into the picture. And as a result of that, got up and walked it out, expressing. Aware, declare, invite, express. Aware, declare, invite, express. And so I do this with all individuals I interact with. And I have the opportunity of working with people with Taoism. I have the opportunity of working with people that are atheists, agnostics, or whatever it is. And so I always work with aware and declare, aware and declare, aware and declare, aware and declare, and express. And express. Aware, declare, and express. Aware, declare, and express. And through that, well, Brady, you just got through telling us that there's really no breakthrough without the assimilation of God in the picture. Absolutely. But the dynamics of people with Taoism, people with agnostics, atheists, these type of things like that, how do we walk forward with sensitivity by addressing the spirituality? And this is where talking about Jesus universally. Now, again, universalists believe, no hell. I'm not talking about that, but the dynamics of how love is universal. We all understanding the dynamics of love and how that is universal. Peace, patience, kindness, goodness, all what Galatians 5 talk about, the dynamics of how we assimilate those into that very picture. And so as a result of that, we are without proclaiming the very name. Even though we understand the name and we're shying away from that, we're just wanting to meet people where they are, just as Paul did with the Athenians and the philosophers in that day. He met them where he was. Where they were. A lot of questions, the dynamics of what are you getting at, are repeating the same destructive patterns. Now, again, as we're talking about this, how can you communicate that in a way that's very sensitive and can be absorbing? Why? Because the need of defense, as God is our defender, if they hear that through the wrong lens and filter, they're going to respond probably in a way that they're not going to want to come back. Let's see, not getting a job is a way to hurt an angry parent or spouse, or demanding to get a job. So the dynamic I'm looking at the notes is the idea of this is that we can actually use things to sabotage ourselves, but are they aware of that? And again, part of that is like, after I've asked a couple of times to help them come into awareness, a lot of times I'll be like, I'm interested. I'm just going to talk out loud. Is that okay for a second? Okay, great. The thought I have is this, and so I want you to be able to push back if this is not, because a lot of times when I say it afterwards, they're like, no, absolutely not, no, oh, and this is the very interaction of Jesus. What he did is asking 3 times, Peter, no, I do love you, yes I do. I think it'd be interesting if the translation would have been like, well, then why are you fishing? That's just my own personal thought. Okay, getting back. The idea of And then finally, the third time, Peter's like, oh, it pains me, but you know all things. And so we can see the techniques of how Jesus actually utilized a lot of the things that we actually utilize now. Why? Because he is capital T, the capital C, counselor. He is the counselor that hopefully what it is that we're cultivating an atmosphere so that people through our interaction is getting to interact with them. And that's the dynamics that we want for them to be able to experience. I have a counseling friend that works with, and of course, spirit-filled believer that works with a works with what are they called? Oh goodness, guys, I apologize. Practicing voodoo, and you might be like, and that's kind of my first reaction, like, okay. So, and what's amazing is this individual, in the past that they've worked with them, this individual comes in and they don't know why they feel such a peace. And this individual will hang out in the waiting room after the session's over with. Why? Because it brings them peace. They don't understand why this individual is at a place of dispeacefulness. Don't know if that's a word or not, but going with it. But she's experiencing it. And so, again, what population do we want to work with? What populations do we not want to work with? And as a result of that, why? What's our motivation? And when you see the idea of how our lives are to be a living sacrifice, and again, me saying that is not trying to motivate you to do something similar. That's a calling of this individual. That's amazing. And who knows, over time, hopefully this individual will come to understand what that piece is, who that piece is. So the opportunity of accepting and assimilating him into her life or his life, so they can continue to move forward, just as we've all had that amazing encounter and experience and invitation. Some of the things as you look through reframing is a tremendous thing as we try to communicate it in a way that gets people to see it differently. Assertive training, relaxing techniques, breathing, mindfulness. This is something I like to do a lot of times, especially the dynamic of grounding. If somebody becomes triggered, right, as a result of that, they're talking about it, it kind of puts them back in that place. Hey, can you look at me? Hey, what color are you? Or, hey, because typically they're looking down. If they're looking at me, hey, can you look at me? But typically when they're looking down, hey, what color are your shoes? Blue. Okay. What color are the shoestrings? They're white. Try to re-ground them and refocus them into the very present, the here and now, instead of what it was that they were just experiencing in the past that was causing them discomfort. Okay? A lot of times that whole breathing, mindfulness is impacting. I'll throw on a worship song or whatever it is if it's appropriate. A lot of times I have these things called whole tones. You can research them if you'd like, and a lot of times I will play those. And they are instrumental, no song, and a lot of times I'll just throw those on and I'll be like, hey, what does it look like for us just to kind of sit? And what I want you to do is the very vibrational frequencies of the song, I just let them kind of attune how you will. Do that at the beginning, at the end, or whatnot, as I get to understand who the client is through that connection. Do I do it with all individuals? No, it's only if it's appropriate by working with them. Role playing is great. A lot of times, especially when you have a teenage son or daughter or whatnot working with the parent. Okay, great. That's what we're gonna do. Y'all are gonna switch roles, and now I want y'all to replay what it was about the cell phone that got y'all that was causing a big problem. Because what we're trying to do is the dynamic of allowing them to see the other person's perspective through the interaction. Homework is a great thing. A lot of times when I give, especially minors, homework, they look at me and I'm like, I know, I'm that individual. I know that you got a lot of homework, and as a result of that, I can't believe Mr. Brady's asking me to do homework. Usually it kind of gets a little laugh or whatnot. And they'll be like, so here's what I want you to do, and here's why I want you to do it. Okay? And so next time we meet, we're gonna assess that, and here's what I want you to do. If it can seem overwhelming to think about doing this every day. So what is something that you feel like could be that's doable? I can do it 3 times. outstanding. So if they come and they're like, we homework, I told you 3, I only did it once a week, in between the times. No, just one time. Okay. Had you done it at all before before the last time? No. Hey, high five. Whack. Well, I thought I was supposed to do it 3. But you know what? It's a start. It's a move in the right direction. And because of that, guess what? Progress. So is that a win? Yeah, maybe. So is that a win? Yeah. Are you sure? Does it sound like you're a little hesitant, a little bit doubting in that? So is it a win? Yes. Nice. Okay. So in that chapter 6, make sure you read chapter 5 as you read chapter 6 and watch this lecture. Semester's going great, at least for me. Hopefully it is for you. If you have any questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, I think everybody was able to get their book last week, so hopefully moving forward with the book should no longer be an issue or concern. Any questions you have, either email me. Probably the best way to go about it. I do look at those questions in the Blackboard sometimes when I always check my emails first. So go there first. And again, you have my phone number to my office. So if it's needing an immediate response, feel free to call me. Chapter 5, chapter 6 this week, Blackboard number 2. And so I look forward to reading your responses, getting to see your thoughts and everything as we continue to journey through this. I hope you enjoyed the assignment number 1. We got 2 more throughout this semester, and as we get closer to week 5, week 6, we will be talking about the final. I know that that's something that's always on our minds within these shortened classes, these 7-week classes. So about week 5, we will start talking about what that looks like. And for students that have had me before, they kind of have a better understanding of the dynamic of, sometimes I give paper and projects for the final. It kind of just depends. I've got a good idea. We're going to kind of journey, and when we get to week 5, we will all look at see what that looks like. So have a great week. Stay warm, and may the Lord's blessings be upon you. Have a tremendous week 3. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.